Good morning, you wonderful YouTubers. Welcome to my channel. You currently find me on a little bit of a gloomy day on my way to BSA Hill near Petersfield. I'm going up there mainly because it's a nice ride, but also because it's another viewpoint of the South Downs. Something you can't get enough of, really, to be honest with you. I do remember, or slightly remember, my sisters tell me it actually happened, that the old man used to take us up there in the winter and the snow, because BSA Hill is a fantastic sledge ride. Absolutely fantastic. We had lots of fun, so I've been told. My sisters have a much better memory of my childhood than I do, so I do rely on them for a lot of what I think I remember. So, what am I doing this week? Well, this week I'm doing a bike history of BSA. And I can almost hear some people screaming that BSA is still making bikes. Yes, they are, but only recently. They actually stopped producing and manufacturing bikes in 1973. And that's what I'm going to take you up to, the point of 1973. So, BSA being who they are and what they made should be an interesting history. So we'll get onto that quite shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to let you just enjoy the scenery, or the trees at least, because let's face it, most of these roads are surrounded by trees. It's not a bad day actually. It's gloomy, it's overcast, and I've got a few spots of rain on my visor, but it's not cold as such. A little bit chilly, but not cold. So I'm actually going to enjoy this ride. A little bit of rain or not, skin's waterproof. So enjoy the scenery, and I'll get on with the history shortly.
This week, as I've said, I'm going to be doing the history of Birmingham Small Arms Motorbike, otherwise known as BSA. I'm sure most of you are familiar with my videos and realise that I do histories on defunct motorbike companies, and I'm sure that just about everyone will know that BSA are once again producing bikes. But what some people, and this is a small minority, might not know is that they stopped producing motorbikes in 1973. And have only recently started again in 2001. In fact, my brother-in-law recently bought the new Gold Star 650, and give him a chance, he'll probably go on forever and ever a time, telling you probably more history about the company than I can, and he'll lament on how good his bike is, and I can't say I blame him. I would love one myself. So today I'm going to take you from the birth of the company in 1861, when they made weapons for the War Office, right up to when they stopped trading as a limited company and were taken over by a government-led package in a bid to save the company. I'm sure that much of what I'm going to tell you will be common knowledge for many, and I'm sure that those many could add more details, but I only have a short time to deliver what will be a nutshell history, so bear with me. So, if you're sitting comfortably, we will start at the beginning. BSA began in June of 1861 in what was known, or is known, as the Gun Quarter in Birmingham. They were encouraged by the War Office to make weapons for the war effort in the wars of expansion in China. The machinery brought in to complete the task for the production of interchangeable parts and mass production then went on to be used for bicycle production. It was from the 1880s that BSA bicycle manufacturing led to the supply of parts to the motorcycle trade. The success of the venture was rapid. Men, used to the precision of gun making, did not relax their standards when they turned to other work, and the BSA hubs were soon joined by bottom brackets, chain wheels and other components which were the finest quality on the market. It was these products which first built BSA's great reputation for quality with the general public. And in 1903, BSA experimented with a motorcycle using a BSA pattern frame with a Minerva 233cc engine fitted, similar to the contemporary Triumphs. It wasn't until 1908 that a complete BSA bicycle was manufactured for the first time in 21 years. It was followed by the BSA motorcycle in 1909. That was a sturdy 3.5 horsepower belt drive machine with a motor that bore more than a passing resemblance to the Triumph engine of the period. These machines sold for £50 and were described as by no means a potterer. It had several novel features such as a double spring forks, and for extra payment could be fitted with a patent cone clutch in the rear wheel. Unbeknown to most people, this machine had had a long development period, and so it's not surprising that the machine was right from the start. In 1910, BSA entered into the bike market with a single model that remained as standard. You could tell by this picture that the build quality was right from the start, which reflected their quality of materials and design. The first model had a vertically mounted 3.5 horsepower engine, chain-driven magneto and sprung forks, and within 6 months from their launching, BSA bikes were selling like hotcakes. The machines were easily distinguishable from rival makes by their yellow and green tank. At TT, rear hub 2-speed model was soon added. In 1915, there was a choice between the 3.5 horsepower model and the 4.25 horsepower model. This latter machine was offered as being especially suitable for sidecar work. It also had the 3-speed BSA gearbox with foot control clutch that was introduced in 1914 and a double-barrel BSA carburetor. Both models had a chain and belt version or in a chain drive with encased chains, which made the machine £3 and 5 shillings more expensive. And like many bike companies in World War I, production was ceased while they pursued the traditional manufacturing of making guns, but quickly returned to bike production with lower staffing levels once the war was over. In 1919, BSA made their first V-twin bikes. The BSA Model E was the first of a series of successful V-twins based around the reliable 770cc side valve engine with cylinders at an angle of 50 degrees. This was also available with their recognisable sidecars for the single cylinder model. In the early 1920s, they acquired an engineer and designer from Daimler called Harold Briggs, who designed new spotting machines for them, including their popular 493cc overhead valve sloper of 1928. Now sporting a much rounder teardrop saddle tank, it sets the trend for other bike companies to follow suit, a standard which is still being used in various forms to this day. Also in 1928 they made their first and only two-stroke, a 175cc unit construction bike which only lasted for one season. In the 1930s, BSA's famous Star series started with the Blue Star singles in 250cc, 350cc and 500cc versions. The Empire Stars followed and became very popular. It was in the 30s that design and function seemed to have stepped up to mark and set even higher standards for others to emulate. Despite these advances, in 1936, major changes were introduced by Val Page, who was formerly of Ariel and Triumph, and who revised and simplified models that were no longer economical to produce. His work remained in production until the 1960s, and they took over the Sunbeam and American Motors Corporation, otherwise known as AMC. Pre-World War II, BSA made many models, but due to my time restraint, I'd just like to go through a few of them just so you can get a general idea of development. I've already mentioned the Model E, so I won't touch on that one now, but the Model A28 and A29 was a 174cc chain-driven two-stroke single-cylinder machine. The C10 and the C11 overhead valve 250cc four-stroke air-cooled machine with a mag dyno ignition for the military versions and the coil ignition for the civilian market. The G14 1000cc four-stroke air-cooled V-twin with a 4-speed constant mesh gearing. The Blue Star, which you can get in a 250cc, 350cc and a 500cc, had a 4-stroke single with 3-speed transmission. And then the Empire Star, which had a 500cc single-cylinder 4-stroke overhead valve engine. And then the Gold Star, which came in at 350 and 500 cc's, had the hand-built performance bikes. The Sloper, I've already briefly mentioned, so called for its forward-sloping engine. It was 493 cc and reached 70 to 73 miles per hour in the Supersports version. The M20, the 500cc air-cooled engine, had a 4-speed gearing chain driven with girder forks up until 1947 and then teleforks after that. The M20 became the motorcycle of the British Army in World War II, as did the M21 600cc version of the same bike. As you can see, BSA were very prolific between the wars, and by 1939 they had become the largest motorcycle company in the world. During the war, the company owned 67 factories across the UK. By the outbreak of the Second World War and until 1941, BSA Guns Limited at Small Heath was the only factory producing rifles in the UK. BSA Guns Limited was also producing 303 Browning machine guns for the Air Ministry, which was the main aircraft armament at the time, at a rate of 600 guns per week. In the March of 1944, the company acquired Ariel, and by the end of the war, BSA also acquired New Hudson and continued to produce their Autocycle until the end of the decade. In their other factories, they made 126,000 of the M20 motorcycles, many of them going to the war effort, as did many other motorbike manufacturers. From 1946, the post-war production saw expansion of the company models using off-road tyres and much more chrome plating. They announced the new competition model, the 350cc B31, which had a 348cc air-cooled engine with a dry sump, a 4-speed manual gears, swing arm forks with shocks, and in 1947 the BSA Bantam, which came in many guises, was the 125 and 175cc piston-ported single-cylinder air-cooled engine, and was to become the company's most successful model. And over the following 25 years, over 250,000 Bantams were produced and are still a favourite of many collectors to this day. In my opinion, if the BSA were to bring out a modern 125 version, they would make a killing with all the learners. As we move into the 1950s, the Bantam grew up to become the Golden Flash, which had a 646cc capacity 4-stroke air-cooled engine capable of 100 miles an hour. They also dipped their toe into the paddling pool of scooters and mopeds. Two models were announced, a moped called the Dandy and a scooter called the Sunbeam. Neither of them did very well, and production of both models was halted. In 1951, the company bought Triumph, and by the mid-50s, BSA were the market leaders, selling 25% of all motorbikes, and then the 50s again saw many models flying off the shelves, such as the A10 and the A10 Golden Flash and the Super Flash. As I've already said on several of my histories, the 60s saw the introduction of affordable cars like the Mini, and bike owners, especially the young ones, soon cottoned on to realise that they had more probability of getting a girl into the back seat of a car than on the back of a bike. So the 60s was a very competitive time for motorbike industry, and as such sales of motorbikes slumped for many manufacturers, and in the 60s saw the demise of many bike companies. It was only BSA's reputation, strong sales to date, and popularity of the brand and a strong export strategy that saw it through this decade, with such models as the A10 Golden Flash, the A10 Road Rocket, the A10 Super Rocket, the A10 Rocket Gold Star, the A50 500cc unit construction, the A50R Royal Star, the A50C Cyclone, the A50 Wasp, the A65 650cc, the A65 Star Twin, and the A65R Rocket. Throughout this period, BSA was employing 4,300 people throughout its many factories, and in 1968 they won the Queen's Award to Industry for Export Achievement. In the 70s now, and in 1971 the company reorganisation centred production at the Triumph site, and together BSA and Triumph launched ranges which included many new models using common parts such as forks and wheels. These models included, but are no means limited to, the B25 250cc, the Victor Special 441cc, the A50 and the A50 Special, which had a 450cc engine, the A65 Thunderbolt that had a 645cc 4-stroke, and the list is almost endless. And although I have included many models in this history, there are still many more besides, which is a good indication of why BSA was so popular both here in the UK and abroad in many different countries. However, the 70s proved to be a very hard time for BSA. The company went into deep financial trouble, and despite being an industrial giant, the company proved unable to compete well against the Japanese flooding of the motorbike market in the UK and abroad. BSA were ultimately bought by Norton and absorbed into the Norton Villiers Triumph Group in 1971, which designed an uncomfortably tall A65 Lightning at the Umberslade Hall before the BSA collapsed. It didn't help their cause when, I should think out of desperation, BSA tried to fill a gap in the market with the BSA Aerial 3 50cc trike. It was an absolute disaster. A few still exist today, but I should think up solely for their comic value. In 1972, BSA had to make major cutbacks, which was soon followed by the demolition of their factory at Small Heath. And in 1973, the name was finally abandoned and production ended. Come 2021, a resurgence of the BSA name and standards saw them rise from the ashes to produce the all-new Gold Star 650. And having seen my brother-in-law's one, I'm a little bit envious. It's a wonderful bike, and may they go on to greater heights. So that's it for the bike history this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week I hope to do a local history. There's still plenty to write about around here.
I'm heading down to Lee now. I'm going to say that's it for now. And let's get the table. Yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Next week, I'm hoping to do a local history again. I have no idea what. I'll have to find something interesting. But until then, ride safe, be safe, and take care. Bye-bye.